Greetings, Hearthstone fans, and welcome back to the Hearthstone Collegiate Championship. It's Championship Sunday, Neptune.
Baby.
I can't believe the journey that we've been on thus far. We started with 800 teams back in January. Yesterday, we were able to have those final 8 teams compete. And now, as of this morning, all that were left were just 4. We saw EPM secure a win against Shawnee State. But now, who's going to be joining them? My name is Justin J.V. Varghese, joined by the one and only Nabil Neptune Pervez. How are you feeling?
I'm doing great, brother. It had a nice night out in the town last night. Got to enjoy some fun times with some good friends. I like everything so far about California so far, including the sick matches we've been having so far.
I thought you were going to be talking about the sticky, icky pork bun bellies that we had. Ooh.
Baby.
Those are great. Those are great. But not nearly as appetizing as this upcoming match. We saw them take names yesterday. Let's see if they can do it again. UT San Antonio getting ready to square off against Rutgers.
UT San Antonio had a pretty fun story. When they were playing up against Colorado, it really felt like the Rebels versus the pristine prep school kind of guys. It almost felt like one of those tropey kind of films. But UT San Antonio, I mean, these guys have come in with a lot of really fun decks and really embraced the spirit of Hearthstone, especially at the beginning of an expansion, right?
And I know that with this particular format, we're going to be seeing those decks fully in action. The way that this works out is these teams had to essentially bring 9 decks total, 1 from every single class. And then you're going to be seeing that these players are paired off into sets that are best of 3 games. You win 3 games, you take 1 set, you win 2 sets, you take the match. Pretty simple. The game set match. It's the epitomology, the lexicon that we're going to be using in order to describe what's happening when and where.
And not only that, just to spice things up a bit, when you win with a deck or lose with a deck, you no longer get to play it again. So there definitely goes into this element of picking exactly what you need and creating an interesting lineup.
Yes, but we saw them yesterday bringing a great deal to the table. Let's welcome them to the stage once again, UT San Antonio.
These guys are fantastic representation of Texas. I'm personally very proud to see these guys coming that far out.
Yeah, this team comprised of Yokians, Selesnian, and Awful. Each of them bringing a little bit of new elements to the team, with Yokians being a mathematics/computer science major, Awful being a comp sci major himself, and Selesnian on the business trade.
Yeah, I think you mentioned Awful was the kind of guy who just ascended down from the heavens.
Yeah, very much so. The way that Yokians and Selesnian met actually was through Math Lab. We'll touch on that in a minute, because right now it's time to meet the other team. Please welcome Rutgers to the stage.
Rutgers, of course, being comprised of some familiar faces. One in particular, the one and only Noblord. Matthew is an absolute beast. Of course, his teammates accompanied by fantastic supports, Orpheus and Ludicolo. These guys are really warriors in their own right, but they've really come together to bring Noblord to that next level. He's had a top 8 placement, but it's not the same as winning the whole thing. So with a combination of electrical engineering, HR, and chemistry, of course, just in case you didn't have enough, these guys bring together a fantastic team that will work together with Noblord at the head.
And I think that that's really interesting, in particular when you talk about this team dynamic. A lot of different teams, every player kind of has their own reasons why they're in it. What I guess the scholarship money at the end, that large slice of that $160,000 scholarship pool would mean to them. But whenever I talk to Rutgers, in particular with Orpheus, what they were telling me was, at the end of the day, the money, it's nice, but they really just revere and respect Noblord that much. And after you talk with him, you can definitely see why. He just has such a brilliant mind. He's definitely a player who has come so close and is very well respected, but is always just at the cusp and never quite having the breakthrough yet. And I am so confident that a solid finish today, perhaps even being able to go the distance, would do wonders for his competitive Hearthstone career.
Absolutely. Noblord definitely being the guy that you're going to be wanting to watch. And because of him, you really see Rutgers as one of the favorites in this particular tournament. Granted, I mean, we're going to be rooting for our Texas boys, of course, but don't worry, none of that bias is going to be coming through, guys. So we're going to be getting into Game 1 of Set 1 right now.
That's right, Yolkins versus Ludicolo for the second semifinal match. Let's figure out who's about to be playing EPM in Grand Finals. So looks like to start off, we're going to be having Hunter squaring off against Rogue here.
Yeah, Hunter being one of these awesome decks that has really been helped a lot with Ungoro in particularly. They are the type of decks that want to have momentum building up early. I'm talking about turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, playing a minion, being smart about your trades, and making sure that early on you're being efficient about board control. Now, on the other hand, we're going to be seeing Miracle Rogue, and Miracle Rogue really is just that. This is the type of deck that really relies on something like Gadgets and Auctioneer. And when you get into that mid to late game, it really is just chucking all this fuel into the fire and doing their best to see if they can find a massive board and push so much damage. But the thing with Miracle Rogue is that you need to be knocking at death's door before you can really push all that damage out. And even then, you have to wait until the door is half open before you can really strike.
And that's what kind of makes this a bit of an uphill battle, I feel for the Rogue. True, you do have a lot of very efficient tools in the early game in order to remove some of those minions that the Hunter's going to be dispatching. But honestly, especially with cards like Dirty Rat, with cards like Rat Pack, it's just going to be such an overwhelming board state that this Miracle Rogue essentially has to find some sort of way to have under control. We're going to be seeing Jeweled Macaw to start off here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Justin. I think just something to keep in mind, folks, is that when it comes to a deck like Miracle Rogue, you have to be aware that the pressure is going to be coming consistently over time. And finding answers like this and patches coming out to the field is a great way to make sure you're maintaining the board control, protecting yourself just enough to last until those miracle turns.
And that's something that the last expansion really brought towards Rogue. That addition of patches allows them to contend with the early game of some of these more aggressive decks.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And also more ways to add fuel to the fire. Of course, you're looking at that Lotus down there, right?
Yeah, we're definitely looking at the Lotus. It's going to give them some Razor Petals in order to get that Gadgets and Cannon revving up should turn 6 come around. But that, of course, is the big question. Can they survive to that particular point? Again, these Hunter decks, they pack so much aggression. Key removal is going to be so critical for them to be able to survive.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But so far, I mean, when we look over at Hunter, we see something there for turn 3 particularly. And an interesting card there, actually, over on the far right, we're noticing, is Mukla.
Yeah, that actually came off of the Jeweled Macaw, and I feel like in this particular matchup, giving your opponent more spells that cost 1 mana is the last thing you really want to do.
You're absolutely right. Especially because once you add that fuel to the fire, that adds card draw, that adds cycle. That's such a key component of Miracle Rogue. But what would you recommend if honestly you had to choose something from UT San Antonio? Do you eyeball the Rat Pack? Do you like the Animal Companion?
Honestly, I mean, at this point, you already committed to playing the Kindly Grandmother. The only issue with this is that it's going to be cleaned up really easily with the dagger play. But if you look forward, that essentially will wipe the minion presence off of the side of Rutgers, which means that they can play things like Animal Companion or Rat Pack on an uncontested board.
Yeah, absolutely. And cards like Houndmaster that are so important for Rat Pack, you're going to be seeing UT San Antonio definitely digging around looking for it. We're going to get the Death Rattle kicking off here. And this is one of the fun aspects of these cards is that Death Rattles gives you something extra to consider. And usually it's after you have some sort of a way to answer the Death Rattles when you want to intentionally pop those kind of minions. Correct, Justin?
Oh, very much so. Very much so. Again, just a relatively simple turn here from the side of Rutgers. And now the decision-making is going to be all on UT San Antonio. We see a second Animal Companion drawn here.
Oh, man.
I think that there's maybe a chance that you just let that rip right now if you want to get a bit more aggressive, maybe hope for a Huffer play.
Always Huffer, Justin.
That's true.
Always Huffer.
That's true.
There's no way.
But there's, of course, the other side of that coin, too, right, Nebs?
Yeah.
Where if you play something like Dirty Rat, or sorry, not Dirty Rat, but Rat Pack, and you can be really confident that on this next turn, you're going to be able to draw into a Houndmaster, that can definitely go a long way. Remember, with the way that Hunter really works now, with cards like Houndmaster, with the recent addition of Crackling Razor Maw, having those beasts that just stick around onto the board can provide serious impact into the game.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Unfortunately, that Crackling Razor Maw notably absent, but Shaku, it's not. He's going to be able to hit the field and immediately be stealthed. So, of course, when a minion is stealthed, you're not going to be able to really interact with that minion until he attacks. So keep that in mind. Turn 4 coming around, and we're not finding the Houndmaster. That's so important for making sure that you're keeping on curve. There's a couple different lines of play that can exist here, but maybe you could also go for another animal companion. You have that as well, but I think Rat Pack, even if that was popped, you would have some more minions that are buffed by Leok, right?
Yes, that's correct. As long as it was popped before the Leok bit the dust, you'd actually be getting 3 rats instead of 2. So that's definitely a line of play to consider. Again, like I think that with Mukla, while it is such an overstated minion as a whole, the fact that it gives your opponents ways to buff up their own creatures as well as those spells to power the gadgets and cannon make it really a bit of a dead card, honestly, in this matchup. And they recognize this, just like you said, Nebs. They're going to be developing the Rat Pack and swinging towards face with the Leok.
And looking over at Ludicolo, let's see what he's going to actually draw into. Hallucination. This is a new card that actually came from Ongoro. It's pretty sick because you can use it to activate combos, but also helps out with adding fuel to that gadgets and fire.
Yeah, it allows you to discover a card from your opponent's class, and that can be really, really useful. And like you talked about, there's a bit of flexibility that comes with it. Maybe in this turn, they could do something like Hallucination into SI7 Agent in order to activate that combo potential. If they wanted to be a bit more aggressive and have more of a presence on the field, they could maybe implement the coin as well and add the Edwin Van Cleef to the board.
I think the first thing that needs to happen is making sure you get a card off of Shaku and going to draw the Piranha Gun. I definitely will look at that kind of card. I think that's definitely one of the best aspects of Hearthstone. It's really that flavor that comes with the game. Easy pick here, going straight for the Unleash the Hounds.
Ooh, this is actually going to be a really juicy turn because they could potentially do proc with the SI7 agent, then prep and unleash the Hounds. But I think they're instead going to be choosing to save that for later because they have Edwin in hand here.
Yeah, absolutely. The SI7 was a great choice here because when it comes to Hunter, you want to make sure that you don't give them those additional stats because of Leok, right? So remove that threat early, mitigate the threats that are coming from Rat Pack popping later on. Crackling Razor Maw, though, coming into hand.
Yeah, that's really useful, and this is why cards like Rat Pack are so useful. Because they're so sticky, it makes it so that you more often than not have significant targets in order to land that Crackling Razor Maw, in order to land that Houndmaster. And this could be the point in the game where we're actually going to be seeing the Hunters start to put a significant presence on the board.
Yeah, this is definitely where the two archetypes are colliding, right? Hunter is all about having the momentum leading into it, and we just see a lot of great removal and tempo plays coming back from Rogue. And that really kind of stifles out Hunter's game plan.
This is such an intelligent play. They're actually going to be using the Thunder Rhino, and because it gives charge to the Beast, it actually gives charge to the minions that pop out of the Dirty Rat. So a really smart way to clean up the board while still having plenty of resources in hand.
Yeah, but there's a couple ways that you could remove this Thunder Rhino, right? You have the way that you can actually coin out into that Vine Slayer, right? One of the new additions that came in from Ongoro.
Yeah, that Vilespine Slayer definitely seems like a nice pick here. I look at this Thunder Rhino, honestly, as a priority 1 removal. You have to do everything in your power to get rid of this thing because of the sheer amount of beasts that are in hand.
Yeah, and when you look at the potential that can come from Hunter, especially with the 1-drops that they usually have, Alley Cats, or even in some cases they might have Hungry Crabs, but you can or even Jewel Macaw. There's a lot of stuff that you can just drop down and start rushing your opponent's face. But they're Rutgers is taking their time. They want to make sure they make the right call here.
I think they're also trying to figure out what they would do next if just playing Vilespine here alone is enough. But they really don't have, I think, any real other options than to go about this. Turn 6 Savannah Highmane, that thing with charge. No thank you. No thank you. They're just going to use the Vilespine, destroy the Thunder Rhino.
Get that out of here. But going into the next one, Rat Pack, of course, now returning, drawing into the second one here. I don't know. There seems like there's no immediate answer that you could really do. But, of course, Animal Companion. Looks like we're getting Leok a second time. Sometimes you want those moments of seeing Misha, but again, we can see that combo. Rat Pack plus Leok get a little bit of some buffs going.
Yeah, and it's nice, but at the same time, it kind of haunts back to the really big problem with this deck and how it's performed thus far. As a Hunter player, you need to make sure that you're on the board early, you're on the board quickly, and you stay on the board with your buffed up minions. we haven't really seen that from the side of UT San Antonio. They haven't been getting in the damage, as you can see by the health counts. And while they've been expending a lot of resources onto the board, they haven't actually been finding as much value. Meanwhile,
ooh, let's go!
Prep into Unleash the Hounds is going to garner a lot of value here. And the fact that they have a second prep for Fan of Night, should they choose to activate that as well, is going to make this an even better turn.
Oh, this is absolutely disgusting. The tempo is shifting so quickly, removing everything on the board. On top of that, dropping down a Van Cleef. This team is a monster. Ludicolo, what a play, what a swing.
And there's not really a good way to answer that with that particular amount of health and attack. I think that this game might be all but wrapped up. UT San Antonio, they're going to go for the Unleash the Hounds. They're trying to use the Crackling Razor Maw. If they can get poison here, they can actually get back into the game. They're able to find the poisonous. That is massive. And down goes the Van Cleef to the cutest of little puppy dogs.
Yeah, this is the kind of counterplay that I love seeing. And one of the things that Hunter particularly struggles with is comeback factors. And Unleash the Hounds is usually the one thing that they rely on. And when you can combine that with Leok or combine that with some sort of a buff, you can get great results. But watching that swing was so sick. Now, Backstab here can remove that Crackling Razor Maw, and then you can just go into face, uncontested, not worrying about a thing, and then also swing with the weapon as well, correct?
Yeah, I think the thing that they're right now contemplating is how much damage is left inside the deck of the Hunter, right? We haven't seen any of the kill commands come out yet. Is it worth taking the 3 damage here, or do they use their backstab? They're going to go ahead and say that it's worth it and start to apply a little bit of pressure. Now, the nice thing about the Piranha Launcher, of course, is the fact that you do have that 1/1 minion that spawns at the end. However, with a card like Unleash the Hounds, does that ever become a liability, Nebs?
Yeah, potentially, because Unleash the Hounds is only as powerful as the amount of minions your opponent has. But we just got a new guest, that new legendary coming from Ungoro.
That's right. And Swamp King Dread, not a card that we really see all that often, but seems like there may be a nice way to remove it. They actually end up getting the kill command, and because they have the Beast on the field with the Piranha, they're going to be able to do maximum damage while simultaneously saving their Eviscerate. That's huge.
This has been so many moments where the favor, the advantage has swung back and forth in unlikely ways. That's pretty sick.
And again, we're seeing these moments where both sides will really develop the bigger threats.
Yeah.
And the other side will miraculously find these answers to them. But we have to, again, look at the decks as a whole. We have to look at what's left in the tank. Does UT San Antonio at this point have enough of a presence both in the deck as well as in the hand in order to close this game out?
So the thing that rogues generally want is bigger hand health, and with a lot of spells, especially when you have gadgets in. And because they've committed so much, and there were so many tempo swings and negations of the board, rogue's kind of in this weird place where they're kind of lacking in hand health. And granted, I mean, Hunter, on the other hand, it's not that much better, but at least you have other bodies that you can drop here. And now, this is going to be kind of a rock and a hard place. Dropping Mucklas here could actually change things if we see the Auctioneer later on down the line. But for right now, I think UT San Antonio is thinking, let's get a body on the field, let's make it a taunt, let's make it tough for these rogue cards to deal with it. And now, Ludicolo drawing into 0. The Poisoned Mind.
Yeah, getting the King Blood Toxin to draw an additional card, trying to figure out some sort of way. He doesn't want to take any real damage here from a phase perspective. So he does have plenty of tools. I think he's maybe using the bananas to buff up the Piranha. Could use the counterfeit coin after that in conjunction with the Eviscerate in order to take out the Mukla. But then lies the problem. Let's say you draw something like Gadgetson. You don't have any cards in hand in order to activate it.
Well, you're right. You're absolutely right. And now it kind of comes into that idea of, now this is why the bananas become that much more valuable, because you're 2 cards closer than you were initially, right? So that's kind of the rock and the hard place, and that's kind of what makes this story so interesting. So what do you think we should be doing here, Justin?
I like this play. They're going to be able to hold on to at least the counterfeit coin for some draw, should they draw into their gadgets in the next turn. And plus the fact that they have Zeril here means that they're going to be able to generate an additional spell in order to get some more draw.
An additional Piranha. Just one more body to add onto the power of the board. Okay, so Rock here, if you drop down Fiery Bat and then drop Rock, you then get the proc off of the taunt. And put your hands up, protect yourself.
That's true, but keep in mind that with a deck like this, if you're playing defense, you're definitely losing because with Hunter, you have to be on offense. You have to be the one that's putting pressure onto your opponent, and that's not something we've seen. Meanwhile,
Auctioneer dropping down. Definitely going to use the coin here and see what we're drawing. Going to Swashbuckler. While that is a minion, you can drop Swashbuckler and get a card out of it. The draw, definitely welcome again.
And here, the Razor Predator Lasher is going to be adding an additional spell to their hand as well. So they're going to be using that here.
What a series of unfortunate events for UT San Antonio. All this coming together, drawing into a sap. Swashbuckler here is going to provide another random class card to the hand.
Yeah, Snipe, I mean, it's not the best thing in the world, but it is another spell which will give you future draws. The one thing to consider, though, is the health total right now of Rutgers. They're actually at 9, and there was a chance if maybe they had drawn into Kill Command. That's 5 damage. Hero Power is 2 damage, plus a 2 damage on board would have actually just been lethal. So missing by the skin of their teeth again because they're exhausting all the resources. UTSA right now is at the mercy of their draws.
But that goes exactly into the class of Miracle Rogue, right? This is why you're knocking at death's door. You're playing it close. And now you're playing against a character like Hunter that is constantly dinging you with hero powers. Oh, man. We're going to get the combos going.
That's right. Another gadgets in here. I'm not sure if that's necessarily what you want. Leroy, though.
Baby.
And that's just going to close things out. What a game. Knocking on death's door, like you said, Rutgers clutches out game number 1 in set 1 against San Antonio.
This is what we came here for. We saw so many swings in power. You're seeing the pop-offs right there. They can't even believe it themselves. This is the type of games that we want to see in Hearthstone, and this is why Ungoro has been so refreshing. We get to see all these guys really come in, compete at the highest level with so much empowerment from Ungoro.
And I just have to, again, applaud both the decision-making on both sides for that game. You notice that UTSA, they could have chosen to develop the Kindly Grandmother, but they held on to it specifically because they wanted that 7 damage burst. They dropped down the Beast, they activate Kill Command, they hit the Hero Power, and that would have been game in their favor. But man, the series of draws off of that Gadgets and into the Leroy exactly when they needed it.
That could not have been any better. But even then, all the swings up until that point were so sick. But guys, let's take a look at the score so far.
That's right. And like we said, set 1 and set 3, the first games of that, were played simultaneously. So we can see a significant advantage in the favor of Rutgers right now. They actually won the first game in both of those sets. So if I'm Selesnyan, I'm feeling quite a bit of pressure. You don't want to set up a triple set point scenario for your other team.
But absolutely. But we're going to be getting into set 2, game 1, Selesnyan versus Noblord. You guys have seen Noblord before in a top 8 before, because especially this guy is a brilliant player. Speaking with someone like him, you really feel the fire of competition. It feels like it doesn't matter what it is. He wants to be the best. He wants to show the world that I can compete. I'm on top of my A game, and I can show you all that I have what it takes to be at the highest level.
I think what's very interesting about Noblord, as well as how the team as a whole kind of functions around him, is that it reminds me of George Washington on the Delaware, inspiring the troops. It's freezing cold water, and they don't care. They're just like, you know what? I believe in the vision. I believe in you, and we're going to make magic happen.
Believe in the me that believes in you?
Something like that. I mean, I feel like they kind of sailed through the Delaware to some extent. They had the really intense regional playoffs, and they were able to come out ahead as well as within bracket play itself. And now, here they are.
Shout out to anime memes. All right, we're getting into this. Rogue versus Warlock. So these are going to be some interesting lists between the two of them. So Rutgers, with their Warlock, has pretty much a standard zoo-ish setup. But they have a couple of interesting choices towards their end game. Now, when it comes to zoo, what you're trying to do is get on the board early, maintain pressure, maintain control, and continue to have that spiral out downwards. And there's some really powerful 2-drops that you're going to be seeing that came in from Ungoro. And on the other hand, we're going to be seeing Rogue, particularly Miracle Rogue. Again, this is the type of deck that spends its time trying to fend off the pressure and the aggression that is coming from its opponents to get to those mid-range miracle turns where you're going to be knocking at death's door and trying to cycle through your deck to find the answers that it takes to overwhelm your opponents.
And this smorgasbord style of Miracle Rogue that we saw yesterday was so much fun to watch. You'll note that it actually has questing adventurers here in place of SI7 agents for the 3 slot. A big way that this deck revolves is having a lot of really cheap spells and minions in order to activate bounce effects with things like Shadow Step in order to juice up Van Cleefs as well as the questing adventurers. So you can expect this game to have some really, really big turns. Should UT San Antonio be able to survive, of course, with this incredibly aggressive play, the double Flame Imps coming on board, they might not necessarily have the time necessary in order to survive here.
Yeah, this is definitely going to put UT San Antonio on a clock. But they have a couple of answers as well with backstabs as well to deal with some of those 2 health minions.
I don't know why they chose not to go for the backstab here. It's going to allow the Ravasaur runt. Flame Claws would be really nice if you want to have a very aggressive line, though at the same time I could see Volcanic Might being the decision so that they're playing around the backstab.
Yeah, I could definitely see that as well. The backstab would then be forced to target the other Flame Imp. So I could see a couple of these other options, but to go back to the backstabs and holding on to that, there is that other idea that maybe UT San Antonio is really praying for that miracle early, and then they're trying to hold on to it and have even more ammunition for later on, drawing into one of their end games, one of their finishers, Leroy Jenkins.
Now we're seeing why they decided to hold off onto that backstab. They want to start juicing up the questing adventurer as soon as possible. The problem is they didn't really draw into any of the very cheap minions that they could bounce back in order to amplify that effect even more.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Buffing the questing adventurer out of the range to be contested from that runt. And now instead we see Noblord drawing into a Malchezaar's Imp. This is also one of the mechanics that usually comes with discarding, that you want to have Malchezaar's Imp there in order to cycle a bit more with your deck. But unfortunately with no discard, with no elements of that, you're just going to see Rutgers start to fill up the board and try to see if they can swarm and overwhelm the Rogue.
Ooh, Fan of Knives. Definitely a nice draw in this particular situation. Going to help alleviate some pressure, but not going to get that questing adventurer out of the range. He needs to draw into a 1-drop here. Prep, I think, would be enough. There is a case where he may use Prep here in order to make it so that that questing adventurer is just outside of range here.
Yeah, that is definitely a possibility. And they're going to have to make a massive commitment if they're doing that, because that means that they're not going to be having it for later on down the line when they could cheapen some of the combo pieces or even make things like Eviscerate or other damage cards a bit less expensive. But instead, you're right, Justin, prepping, buffing this man up, pulling him outside of the range, swinging to face, and just like this, we're seeing the aggression coming back into Noblord's hands.
Ooh, that's a huge draw. Direwolf Alpha is going to be giving them just enough juice in the tank in order to eat up that questing adventurer. But then the question is, what do they do next? There was a chance that they wanted to go wide on the board like this in order to set up for a nice Sea Giant play. After this, it's going to be a matter of figuring out if they're going to be able to have enough resources left. By attacking so aggressively the way that they did, they made it so that tap now is a liability on the side of Rutgers.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Justin. So early on, you want to make sure that you're using life tap as soon as you get into around turn 5, because that's when your curve starts to lessen out and you have less minions from minions on 4 and 5, and you open yourself up to life tap and finding more options, digging through your deck, but at that expense of your life. And now we're looking at a Warlock that's very fragile. So Rutgers has to see if he can find some sort of option that's going to help maintain the board, protect himself.
They need Defender of Argus from this point. We see the sap in hand, so something like a Voidwalker alone wouldn't be enough. I'm pretty sure Leroy into Shadow Step is going to be the play here, and this is going to set up a 2-turn clock for Rutgers.
Oh, man. So, Rutgers is going to have to find something right now.
Whoa! How much damage is that? 7? Oh, just a little bit short there. They could do something where they play Malchezaar's Imp, Soulfire, hope they can draw into Soulfire afterwards. Of course, they will be able to use the tap in this particular position as well because, like I said, they're on the 2-turn clock anyways.
Yeah.
The difference in 2 health doesn't really make a huge difference here.
Now is the Hail Mary. Now is the time where you just throw caution to the wind. Play to win. Play to your outs. Don't play to not lose. So Now, I don't know. I feel like this is the only line of play right now, Justin. Right?
Yeah, and they're going to get 2 draws off of this because they have 2 Malcazar Zips.
Do you see any merit to the idea of tapping before you go drop down Malcazar Zip and then Soulfire?
I think the only issue with that is, let's say you draw into a Soulfire after you tap, then there's a chance that you could discard your Soulfire and lose the game right there.
Whoa.
Getting the Direwolf. Let's count the damage.
Is that going to be enough?
Yeah, it's just barely enough. I cannot believe it. The Direwolf being the difference maker as Rutgers etches out another win. So this sets up a very scary scenario for UT San Antonio. That is triple set point with a solid sweep in this first wave of games.
I can't believe this. I don't think Rutgers can believe it either. These guys had their hands in their head in their hands, and they're just thinking, I don't know how this actually came to be. Absolutely ridiculous play. And really having your back to the walls and just saying, you know what? I know I can fight back here. I got something still left in the tank, just enough to take it over the top.
Well, let's go ahead and take a quick look at the score thus far. We're going to be seeing Rutgers, like we said, win 3 games straight, won in every single one of these sets. Because each of these sets is a best of 3, if they win even 1 more game in every set, they're going to take the set outright. Yeah. So from this point on, UT San Antonio, it's very critical that they're at the top of their games, as they've had losses with their Hunter, their Rogue, as well as their Druid.
Yeah, but in order to find out if UT San Antonio is going to be able to continue in this game, continue swinging, we're going to be going to set 1, game 2.
Oh, man.
Sorry. Set 2, game 1.
Set 2, game number 1?
Set 2, game 2. I'm sorry.
That's a lot. It's a lot of words.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's tough. Words are hard sometimes.
I'm apologize.
So the Noblord Selesnian rematch then, like we said, it came down to the wire previously. And a bit of I guess a talking point is where they're actually going to be going with their decisions. Of course, there is the Hunter on the side of Rutgers with some very interesting tech choices. But UT San Antonio does have some interesting decks as well, in particular with that Paladin. That thing is so aggressive and so filled with minions.
So we're going to be getting into our next game here.
Yeah, getting ready to get into the next game.
So I look at this. I look at these guys, and they're pretty much looking with their back to the wall. UT San Antonio is really a brilliant group of guys who have tried to be smart about their decisions up until this point. They've added a lot of technology. They started to embrace the spirit of the beginning of the meta. Whenever you get a new expansion rolled in, you get to come up with a bunch of ideas, experiment, but also know what everybody else is playing and try to find your role and how it can cultivate something new here. So we're going to be seeing 2 guys who have both also really embraced it on both sides. I feel like when we talked with UT San Antonio, they kind of went a little bit more of a deeper dive into the experimental phase, though.
Yeah, very much so. And just as a clarification, this is actually going to be set number 1, game number 2, which we're going to be dropping into. Apologies for the bit of a mix-up there. That's going to be Yokians squaring off against Ludicolo. And like we said, Ludicolo came out ahead previously, but this is what we've been waiting to see. The Murloc Shaman coming through from the side of UT San Antonio.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one because we have Unite the Murlocs as the quest that we're going to be continuing to go into. So the way this works is you're going to see Shaman continue to play Murloc after Murloc after Murloc, and preferably on curve. And after you've dropped 10, you are rewarded with Megafin. What Megafin does, it's a 5-mana 8/8 that refills your hands with Murlocs. Now, this sounds dope, but the reason why it's relevant is you spend so much time dropping cards that you don't get to draw cards yourself, and you kind of have a tough time with hand health. So think of it as you're continuing to run the gas, push your car as hard as you possibly can, and run on empty, and hope that you get Megafin, and then refill the tank, and then go rushing to the finish.
Yeah, and on the other side, of course, in terms of Shaman, we're actually going to be seeing a very aggressive variant of Shaman coming through from the side of Rutgers. You would think that because of all the low-cost Murlocs that are in this deck, you'd be expecting a very aggressive style deck. But talking with UT San Antonio, they actually view this more as a battle of attrition than anything else, because you expunge all of your resources, and then you use the Mega Fin essentially to refill. And as long as you can last through the 2 board clears and your opponent doesn't have a third, that's when you're able to win out the game outright.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So there's going to be a couple of different ways that you're going to see the early aggression coming, though, at least with the Pirates package.
Yeah, and right now, looking at UT San Antonio's hand, it's just far too slow. Like you said, they want to get Murlocs down from turn 1 onwards. They haven't had any plays in order to use something like the hero power on turn 2 against a deck like this. It just feels bad. And the fact that they don't really have strong removal and they rely on minion presence to clean up the board is going to make this such an uphill battle for them.
Yeah, you're absolutely right here, but Jade Claw is the exact answer that you needed for that taunt totem. And we're just going to go face. Always the place. But let's hope to see maybe something a bit more on curve. What do you think about this, Justin?
It's just feeling bad.
Yeah, this doesn't feel right. Because you want to kind of build that momentum and play on curve and have minions that often complement themselves with synergy. And Cold Light Seer here, you're not going to get the benefit of the battle cry, unfortunately.
And that's actually a very big talking point. That Cold Light Seer, when you have a board full of Murlocs, can be such a decider in deck types like this. But they're forced to play in this particular scenario in order to eat up some damage.
Yeah, the onslaught, the aggression that's coming from Rutgers right now, and just punishing the unfortunate draws that UT San Antonio is suffering right now. Not even worrying about it. Jade Claws again, continuing to ramp up that curve of Jade Golems.
And they're going to be locked for 1 mana in this turn 4, but that's okay. They're going to be having the Mana Tide Totem available for them to refill. On the side of UT San Antonio, they're going to be inching closer to getting that quest. Every single one of these Murlocs actually counts towards that quest count.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just to elaborate a little bit more on some of the mechanics, whenever you're overloaded, think of it like you're paying up front for something, and you're just telling Hearthstone, yo, I'm good for it. I got you, don't worry. Maybe I'll suffer for a turn or two, and you can lock me out of one of these crystals, but right now I know I need this real bad. So they're forwarding you alone. It's a pretty fun mechanic, and often leads to some explosive combinations.
I don't think Thrall Wentworth has the same ring to it that JG does. I'll be honest.
But is there anything else that you'd play here, Justin? I mean, you could go for Mana Tide Totem. You could try to see if you can get the additional card draw. Maybe you just hit the hero power, get another totem out, maybe make things from below a little bit cheaper. Looks like we're going for Mana Tide Totem instead, actually.
Yeah, I think it just makes the most sense. You want the draws. They don't have anything to indicate that they have strong board clears, so you're not really worried about something like Lightning Storm. They would have used it on a previous turn. And another less than ideal draw for UT San Antonio. Now, they can put down both of those Primal Fin totems to actually eat up some damage, so it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, but this is, again, the problem of not hitting the ground running with minions.
Yeah, exactly. And while you do drop these down, these are recent additions from Ungoro, and this is part of what we're talking about when it comes to experimentation, trying out some new stuff, and cultivating some exciting things, but I don't see really much else that could be done on the side of UT San Antonio. They're going to get a couple minions to come pop out here, and they're going to count towards the quest, which we're getting ever closer to, and potentially seeing Megafin come out here and give them that second win that UT San Antonio so desperately needs.
The only issue with that is, sure, Megafin drops out, they refill their hands with Murlocs, but they're not necessarily refilling their hands with answers to this particular board state. And beyond that point, will they even be able to survive to the point where Megafin will be a serious contender?
It isn't looking good, Justin. Look at all this damage that's flinging around, getting rid of the totems, stopping the bleeding, having the fire elemental hitting the field as well right now. I don't know. This really looks like potential just rip. I mean, and even then, Megafin hits the field, you have the counterplay coming out with Hex. Sure, you can drop the 5-mana 8/8, but this is one of the answers that comes with Shamans. Shamans are so well-rounded. They have so many different ways to create opportunities. But the snowball that really Ludicolo has been implementing on top of the unfortunate draws, the lack of solutions.
Well, Maelstrom Portal, maybe we'll be able to clean up a bit of the board state as a whole. They're looking for a spell power totem here, and they're not going to get it. Nothing is going right in the way of UT San Antonio.
Oh man, you hate to see these kinds of things happen. This is the level of play that there's nothing that really UT San Antonio could have done in this situation. They're trying their best. They're fighting really hard, and it feels like they're fighting against the Hearthstone gods as well. But Rutgers is just continuing to slowly inch their life totals further and further down, and also making smart trades. Shaman is so particularly board-centric that taking the extra time to remove these threats is really the smart decision.
Now, actually, a bit of a toss-up on their decision here. I look at the Aya. I think it's right on curve, and I think it would be a fine play.
Yeah, I agree.
Very resilient to a board clear because that Death Rattle will also summon another Jade Golem.
I think it's the right play. It creates another body, and with another body, you can trade effectively with whatever you're going to be seeing UT San Antonio drop back down.
So yeah, Aya hitting the field. And now if a Lightning Storm comes out, there's still going to be more left over. Meanwhile, a Devolve here too, and that actually is a nightmare of a card whenever you're UT San Antonio. Let's say you have the nice, big, beefy board of Murlocs. All of a sudden, those synergies go away. You toss out Devolve, and now, at worst case, you could have a bunch of Wisps.
Yeah.
It just feels bad.
Absolutely. And it looks like UT San Antonio is going to continue fighting back. Grimscale Oracle and then the Bloodlust?
Yeah, they're tapping out. They're done. They know that from this point onwards, there really isn't anything they can do with this game.
Man, that's a rough way to go out. But unfortunately, you're going to win this one, my friend. Ludicolo is going to take this one over UT San Antonio.
That's right. That set going in favor of Rutgers. And this is back-to-back games where we've seen the lack of board control from these board-centric decks that UT San Antonio is bringing to the table is not allowing them to play the game that they have been seeking to play.
Yeah, I mean, with Shaman, it's also another case of, while this deck is well-rounded, while they have a lot of unique tools, what you need to have is that momentum that's built up early on, especially if you're going to be playing a Murloc quest deck. And whenever you have those Murlocs start to build up and you start to run out of gas, the Megafin really would have been helpful. But even then, they didn't get that far to even pull out Megafin. They didn't even complete their quest.
And I don't even think it would have been enough. Again,
yeah,
especially
exactly.
when you look at the hand, the fact that they had Devolve on top of that as well. Ugh. It's looking like a beatdown, and the score sheet says the same. Right now, one set going in favor of Rutgers, and this is actually going to be putting them on double match point. If they win another game from this point forward, they will be advancing to grand finals today.
So this is going to be potential match point here. We're going to be going to set 3, game 2. Awful versus Orpheus. I think that there is definitely something to be said here about both of these guys having unique roles in their team, right? Awful being the guy, the godsend, the man who descended from the heavens for UT San Antonio to really help them advance further into this bracket. But Rutgers, on the other hand, having Orpheus. I mean, Orpheus and Ludicolo, both of them are strong players in their own right, but they were there to really learn a lot from Noblord. They wanted to get as many games in as possible, see what Hearthstone is like when you're traveling with someone like Noblord. And
I mean, they're loyal soldiers to the commander that Noblord has really been for this team, and it's honestly a beautiful sight to see them rally behind him at every turn.
Yeah.
For them, at the end of the day, the most important thing is to make sure that they can help propel Noblord over to a championship title here.
Yeah, and it's really endearing to see that these guys care so much about seeing Noblord come out on top. I mean, and not to mention, you have someone like Noblord in your corner, coaching you, helping you through these scenarios. This man has seen it all, and I mean, just speaking with him, he really has a very unique and smart perspective on the game of Hearthstone. But let's get into it. Our next game right now, Awful versus Orpheus. UT San Antonio taking on Rutgers.
And this is the Priest deck that's been making a lot of waves. A Highlander-style Priest. It's not something that we had really expected to see with the exit of Reno Jackson, but what this deck has is just such a variety of answers and flexibility for pretty much every single deck type. In fact, when they were building this out, as you can see with cards like Wild Pyromancer, they wanted to have answers for very aggressive decks. So even if they're staring at the face of Pirate Warrior here, I can tell that they're going to be playing very confidently.
Yeah, that's the thing. This Priest we saw yesterday is super sick. It has a bunch of different variety in here. You would think that with Reno rotating out, you wouldn't be seeing as many Highlander-style decks, but now, I mean, the Priest is one of the deck archetypes that actually can do it. Particularly, Raza adds in that extra health for 0 cost for your hero power whenever it pops off and hits the field. But let's talk a little bit about Awful, and we can talk a bit about Pirate Warrior. This is something that has been really destroying the ladder for the past 2 expansions, right? We saw it really come onto the field and have an explosive start, and that's really the theme of this deck: playing smartly on curve 1, turn 2, turn 3, having a pirate coming down and making use of the synergies between not only pirates but the weapons and the ways that you can just sling as much damage to the face as possible. But it has a limited amount of gas, and whenever you run into a control deck that's all about having elegant solutions for all the questions that you are putting on the board, that's when you can find yourself in a really tough position.
And let's talk for a minute about some of those tech choices to provide those elegant solutions. In particular, I want to highlight that they have Gluttonous Ooze in this deck.
Yes, a super interesting card, especially when that's actually tech specifically against Pirate Warrior, because you can get all that armor back as well as damaging your opponent's weapon. So useful. This is a brilliantly designed card specifically to deal with the meta that had come in prior to Un'Goro.
So Doomsayer here just to prevent the development of minions onto the field. But there's a good chance that we might actually just see the Fiery War Axe be equipped and swung to face.
Yeah, I don't blame them, actually, because you don't have enough power between those to actually deal with the Doom Guard. And this is a really good solution to it. When it comes to this Priest deck, there's a lot of strong options that you have available to deal with the early aggression that can come with a lot of these Pirate Warriors.
Yeah, the Doomsayer here, honestly, I don't know if I'd ever sink any damage into it whatsoever. The way that you win if you're UT San Antonio here, if you're awful, is you need to get the damage into the early game. Because if this game goes towards, say, turn 10, there's a very, very strong chance that the Priest is just going to run away with it.
Absolutely. But by that time, all the gas has long been gone from all these Pirate Warriors. And particularly, whenever you get a lot of these controlling elements, Wild Pyromancer is one of them, especially when you combine that with a spell and you start to whittle down the board slowly but surely, and especially against the lower bodies that sometimes come with Pirate Warrior.
So Wild Pyro, I think, is going to be a great play here just to check the board. There's a chance that they may be trying to tempt UT San Antonio to actually have the War Axe swing to eat up some of that damage. Of course, South Sea Deckhand picked up does present an alternative line of play should they want to keep the weapon strong and perhaps put the South Sea Deckhand in. At the same time, I'm honestly looking at the South Sea Deckhand, and I think that over time it could probably gain more value than just the weapon.
Well, so let's think of another potential play here where you can upgrade and make your Axe 4, and then coin and then drop down the Blood Sail, and then you get a nice big body. And then you could also use the Axe to remove the Wild Pyromancer. You think that would work?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a possibility. I think he's just going to be going very wide on this board. Keep in mind that with the Journey to Un'Goro, they lost cards like Excavated Evil, which means that turn 6 is the big turn to be worried about if you're thinking about a board clear.
Ooh, going all in, only keeping one of the Blood Cell Raiders. And now the question is, how do you trade, if at all?
Yeah, I think that they're going to be valuing the presence on the board rather than the attack from the weapon here. Holy Nova does get picked up, but keep in mind that's only 2 damage, and we're seeing some strong 3 health minions that are on this field.
Yeah, they would be able to sustain against it. But what are some alternatives here? I think that this is where sometimes you can look at one of the recent additions, Shadow Visions. That can kind of be useful in some of these scenarios, right? You can really dig through your deck and look through your toolbox and see if you can find some solutions for either now or maybe in a turn or two.
I think here the play more than likely is just develop Priest of the Feast. If they Shadow Visions, try to look for an answer for the Bloodsail Corsair, or sorry, the Bloodsail Raider, it's going to be at too much cost. Keep in mind that Shadow or Death costs 3 mana, and the Shadow Visions themselves cost 2.
Fair point. Priest of the Feast hitting the field, and now you're going to be able to see what Awful is going to draw into.
Wow, Bloodsail Corsair. This is the stroke of luck that UT San Antonio has been waiting for. They've been ahead for a majority of this game with no signs of stopping. I'm expecting here for the Bloodsail Corsair to come down and for the combination of the South Sea Raider as well as the weapon to clean up the Priest of the Feast.
Yeah, it seems like that would be a great choice. But they're going to take their time to think about it. What are some of the potential ramifications of this? You're going to be going a bit wider on the board. Do you have to worry about any AoEs that can be coming back from Priest?
The biggest worry, especially with the health of these minions, is Dragonfire Potion. The problem with that is there's still another turn before that comes up. right now, if you're UT San Antonio, you're starting to try to calculate the damage, equate the fact that a Dragonfire Potion on turn 6 would probably wipe your board, and then determining what the impact of that would be in order to figure out where the damage is going. I like to play cleaning up the board and now putting a significant clock, but Lyra added to hand, unfortunately won't be doing a whole lot. They're going to need a Shadow Visions to find a very specific answer for that Blood Cell Raider. And as we can see, coming up a bit short, they're not finding the Shadow Word Death. Binding Heal, however, will allow them to sustain a bit longer, but this just might be too much damage. We're going to be seeing 12 on board, combined with the weapon in hand. And I think that just may be all she wrote.
Yeah, we're going to be looking at quite a bit of damage from UT San Antonio.
That's lethal.
And with that South Sea deckhand, it's all going to come down, crumbling down for Rutgers for this game.
Yeah, and Rutgers, I mean, the Priest itself, like we said, if it was able to survive, you can look at the hand size of UT San Antonio. They were running out of gas. But unfortunately, because of just how quick Pirate Warrior comes and because they couldn't find the answer to that Bloodsail Raider, they're actually going to be falling short here.
Yeah, in particular, when it comes to Warrior, playing smartly on curve 1 through 5 will lead you to this great advantage. And only once you hit 5, you really have to worry about AoEs coming from the other side with Priest. Keeping it simple and just running it effectively, UT San Antonio has claimed this game.
So putting 1 on the board, there's, I suppose, a light at the end of the tunnel, as you can see. Selesnian with a brief pop-off. He's happy. The last thing he wanted to do was get completely swept in this Championship Sunday stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And these guys are coming out here to represent not only, themselves as players, but their region, their college, their communities. They have a lot of friends and family and friends that are all watching them and just cheering them on. Don't want to let these guys down.
That's true.
I mean, they did a great job, though, of coming in here with, keeping it simple, letting it rock with that Pirate Warrior. But let's check the score so far and see exactly where we are in this match.
It's a lot of red. It's not looking good if you're UT San Antonio. Again, from this point, you're going to have to pick up every single game in order to stop Rutgers from securing the series. But a bit of life, a bit of momentum. The big talking point, though, is the fact that Awful now has to rely on Warlock to close things out. And when I talked with UT San Antonio, that's one of the decks that they really don't have any faith in compared to the rest of their lineup.
So we're going to be getting into our next game. It's going to be set 2, game 2. Selesnian against Noblord. There's a couple of different opportunities here, but I think the fun talking point here is definitely Paladin in particular, because Paladin has been a deck that previously in the meta, pretty bad. But thanks to the powers of Ungoro and us taking a trip to Jurassic Park, we now gain all the abilities that we need to make this deck go from the bottom to the top.
I like it. Dinosaurs are cool. I'm definitely a fan. And I'm glad that Paladin isn't extinct with this expansion either.
Yes, I definitely agree. Especially because there's a couple of different ways that you can actually play Paladins right now. There's 2 really strong variants of the mid-range variety, right? You have the guys that really dig deep into the power of Murlocs and just let it rip from there, so to speak, right? And then you kind of have the mid-range guys, the guys that bring in heal with Ivory Knight, so to speak, right?
I like the combination, right? So it's the business in the front, party in the back, or maybe rewired, depending on how festive these Murlocs are feeling. Because, you'll see the nice curve with turn 1, Vilefin Inquisitor, Rockpool Hunter to follow up after that, Murloc Warleader after that. Suddenly, you may not be playing an aggressive deck, but you have an aggressive curve in order to fight off the board. But what's very interesting, if we're talking about the Paladin lineup on Rutgers' side, is they have Hemet actually in their deck.
You're right. Now, the reason why this is pretty sick, in all honesty, is the fact that when you get towards the end game, you don't want these itty-bitty Murlocs. You want the good stuff. You want the heavy hitters. You want the big guns. And with something like Hemet, you get easier access to it. You know what? Chuck all the old guys out. We don't need any of these small bodies. Let's go for the big guns. So Hemet being a very interesting pick in this deck, and I'm very curious to see how much it actually favors them.
Well, worth noting is the Paladin not present from the side of Rutgers, but very much so from the side of UT San Antonio. And this is a very interesting Paladin deck. Instead of being more mid-range oriented, this is incredibly aggressive. It's going to rely on having a very cheap hand overall, dumping everything onto the field, and then refilling with cards like Divine Favor. And queuing up against this Druid, because it is a Jade Druid and is more long game equipped, this could be a very, very tough matchup for Rutgers.
Yeah, so definitely to touch on it and expand a little bit more, when you talk about Jade Druid, you're talking about a deck that is accelerating in two ways. You're trying to accelerate your mana curve, and you're trying to accelerate your Jade curve. The idea being is that you want to make sure that you have fantastic Jades towards the end of the game. You're trying to remove threats, sustain against a lot of these aggressive decks, and get to that end game where it's really all you. You are generating massive tokens that can swing in for huge amounts of damage. But on the other side, we're looking at UT San Antonio, and they have some interesting choices. What they're trying to do is slam down cards as quickly and effectively on curve as possible. And, you know, in some ways buff the board using some of these interesting cards that came from the mean streets of Gadgetzan.
I think that here there's a good chance they may opt for the Smuggler's Run and then coin out the Murloc Tidehunter. The reason why is because it's pretty resistant to swipe, and it will allow them to proc once again with the Primal Fin Lookout.
Yeah, and it also goes towards them getting more value off of the Divine Favor, right? By slamming more of these cards down and even using cards like Cold Light Oracle, you give your opponents more cards, and then when you work with the Divine Favor, you draw even more cards, get even more value. It's pretty sick.
Well, more value is definitely the name of the game. Instead of using the Smuggler's Run immediately, they want to have a much more minion-centric presence in hand in order to maximize the value from that. This deck does have a lot of unique ways of refill. We did see the 2 Divine Favors in hand, but it also actually packs a small-time Recruits in order to combo with the Smuggler's Run.
Now we're going to drop down that Jade Behemoth. The idea here, you can contest with this Cold Light Oracle. It's a nice big body, and you also have the threatening damage. But then again, Smuggler's Run is also here to help buff up these hands. Cold Light Oracle also works in the sense that you get a minion that also throws more cards into your hand and more potential targets for Smuggler's Run to help buff it all up.
This particular taunt, this decision to innervate out the Jade Behemoth is so intelligent when squaring up against a deck like this. Let's say something like Murloc Warleader came out, not only would this Cold Light Seer not able to take the Jade Behemoth off the table entirely, but also you have a minion that will outright trade with the buff that the Murloc gives.
And not only that, it also opens them up for turn 5. You have some options as well. Noblord could choose to go with Druid of the Claw and react to the situation, or if he thinks he's safe, he can go for Nourish, get even more cards going, or even choose to ramp if he so desires. But instead, Vilefin Inquisitor dropping down, swapping over the hero power from summon a dude to summon a Murloc.
And that's really specific and ties very well with all the Murloc synergies that this deck is hoping to activate. We see the Primal Fin Lookout, and now even if everything gets wiped out on turn 5, they're still going to be able to activate it with the hero power.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So there's a couple of options here, though. I think whenever we first saw Angora, we kind of theorycrafted like Earthen Scales. The card looks really sick. I'd love to see it in Jade, especially towards the end game, because you can get a lot of that health back, especially if you're being rushed down from all these aggro decks. You can get a little bit of the armor back. Instead, Druid of the Claw coming in here, trading effectively, and now we have a board state here. But on the other hand, is there anything that you really can see from UT San Antonio that could help contest this?
Honestly, it's tough. I expected initially for Rutgers to maybe taunt up the Druid of the Claw, but they're saying that the best defense here is a good offense. The way that UT San Antonio wins this game is by having synergy off of their Murlocs. So if you wipe the entire board of Murlocs, they're not going to be able to activate their win condition. That being said, though, we see the glowing cards in hand. These Murlocs that are available, for the most part, are very much juiced and ready to hit the field and make a significant presence.
Hydrologist here would hit the field, 2 mana 4/4, but he would also get a secret. Getaway Kodo, Redemption, and Noble Sacrifice. Is there anything that you particularly lean towards?
I think with Getaway Kodo, you might be able to have more value overall. There's a chance that they could go for the Noble Sacrifice because more than likely, if they, say, hit with the Jade Behemoth first, they have a way to clean up in the next turn with the Bluegill Warrior. And that's the line of play that they see thus far. I'm really enjoying it.
Noble Sacrifice getting picked up. And now you see Silesian just trying to see if he can put something on the board to help contest against Rutgers. Drawing into a Nourish, though, Rutgers could dig a bit more and try to see if he can find some solutions. But Swipe here, looking like it'll take out 2 of the minions.
As well as the Earthen Scales. Now, while this is primarily valued for the armor, the nice 1/1 buff does set up for the trade. And because this is such a minion-oriented deck, they're not going to be having clean ways to wipe this board immediately.
Yeah, so I think this goes back to the problems that we're really having with getting on the board, staying on the board, and continuing to have momentum as you roll into it, right? And because we saw Nobbler doing such a good job of eliminating threats and continuing to maintain dominance through solid bodies, effective trading, UT San Antonio is struggling to find an answer here.
It feels like Rutgers is doing a really good job of playing around Divine Favor as well. You notice that they're actually limiting their hand size to make sure that Divine Favor doesn't get the value that it's looking for. And because of that, UT San Antonio, they've been on the back foot, and they don't necessarily have the ways to really propel forward into this game.
You're absolutely right. Bluegill Warrior hitting down and Noble Sacrifice. Tries to trade in here and just get a dude. Try to see if he can find something that's going to manage to stay on the board.
Honestly, it's tough. This is, again, the portion of the game where if you're UT San Antonio, you're hoping you have a board full of Murlocs. You're hoping to empty out your hand and pop the Divine Favor in order to continue the cycle and the stampede of Murlocs. But that's not what we're seeing at all. Instead, this control that we're seeing from Rutgers, starting with that innervated Jade Behemoth, has shut down all of the offense from the side of UT San Antonio.
I think there's definitely something to be said, though, about the side. When you look at Noblord, they've had these nourishes, but they haven't chosen to play them. Because you're right, they're playing around the Divine Favor. But that also means that there's 2 cards in their hands that we wish could be minions. At least Noblord does. So when it comes to Druid, though, your endgame is really based around having bigger minions than your opponents. And in some ways, Druid is about cheating out bigger minions than your opponents, and that works particularly well whenever you have someone like Paladin throwing a bunch of these smaller guys at you trying to swarm you.
And like we said, playing around the Divine Favor, that's why they chose not to opt for drawing cards there, instead wanting to ramp up their mana. The way that Rutgers has been approaching this has been nothing short of intelligent. They have all of the reads in hand. They understand that right now there are a couple of cards that are just looming, waiting to be activated by UT San Antonio, and they just have such a good handle on exactly what those cards are.
And UT San Antonio using the Discover mechanic here, trying to find something else. Ooh, value. Going for another lookout potentially, but I don't know. What are your choices here? Could you also see Chum in a world?
I could see Chum because of that Bluegill Warrior that's sitting. The fact that it would be a 3-2 with charge at that point could be really nice for at least getting some damage onto the board. But honestly, I feel like from this point forward, you want something like Murloc Warleader more often than not in order to buff up that minion presence that's available. But looks like they're going with your line of play, getting the Grime Skill Chum.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the mindset could be, you're right. They want to definitely find those Murloc Warleaders, and it looks like they're definitely struggling to get them. And with that, with those big bodies, you get some fantastic trades. But Grimscale Chum nailing the Bluegill. And let's see, we're just going to run to face.
I'm definitely expecting that, to say the least. And beyond that, because that was such a low-cost minion, it allows them to finally start finding value off of their Divine Favor, something that they haven't been able to do since the very start of this game.
Now, you also are going to see now that they're drawing a couple more cards here. They expect to play them now because you have a lot more mana to work around with. Wrath could be pretty dope, especially considering that you could use that for a bit of removal. Also, there's the ability to also use
Use Thalnos with the Wrath in order to take out the Primal Film Lookout. I got you.
Yeah, thank you.
We're friends.
I'm
We
sorry.
finish each other's sandwiches. It's all good.
But I don't know. This is kind of getting into that nice place for Druid where you didn't get that removal early on, but now it's actually coming into a lot of use here, especially because a lot of these bodies are smaller.
And again, they're going to be innervating out this Druid of the Claw. Question is whether they're going to be going for charge or for taunt here. I think that the charge makes sense given their game plan thus far. And going for the value trade here, I like it. They want to make sure they're still able to maximize the amount of value that they're going to be getting from these particular cards.
Could you see that they could drop down both their minions and then go directly into Divine Favor here?
Yeah, I think that that's definitely the name of the game. And what's intriguing about this is whether or not they're going to be tapping first. I think that instead they don't want to rely on the 3-4 Hungry Crab. They want to rely on whatever's left in their deck. So that's why they're not going to be tapping first while keeping the Grimescale Chum onto the field.
Drawing up and trying to see if they can use anything here. You could use that Murloc Tidecaller if you really want to get back onto the board.
Yeah, the Tidehunter here I think would be fine. It ends up finishing out their curve pretty decently well, but they haven't seen Swipe yet. So that might be why they're taking a minute just to think whether or not they want to expunge that onto the field.
I think they saw one early on, and they're waiting for the second one. And they're thinking that they've seen one card since the beginning of the game, and it could very well just be swipe again.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So definitely a couple of factors to consider here.
They're making a choice. They might just actually hit hero power.
I think they need to go for this play.
They're doing it. They're going for it. Murloc Tidehunter hits the field and expands the board just a little bit wider. And now drawing into Feral Rage. This is a great card, particularly for Druid, because it allows them that flexibility. But right now, they need to draw, figure out some solutions. So Wild Growth here is going to give them another card draw. I wonder if there's anything that they're particularly hoping to see.
Oh, I think that's probably something that they were hoping to see. Aya hits the field. And this is going to, again, just produce such a commanding presence onto this board. And one that I'm not sure how UT San Antonio can necessarily dig out of. They need a Murloc War Leader at this point, and they're just not finding it.
Are you kidding me? It feels like we've gone through so much of the deck, and this guy hasn't even wanted to show up. Oh, man, what a rough spot. Why? So I imagine that now that that Aya has hit the field, they're kind of considering other ways to go around it. Finja is something that is also available. Also, Grimscale, you could potentially draw some more cards and then Divine Favor again and look for some more answers potentially. I don't know. This seems like a really tough spot for Selesnyan.
Yeah, it's certainly a rock and a hard place position. There really, I don't think, is a very clean one single turn answer to dealing with this board state. So instead, they're just going to be developing Finja, getting the value out of Divine Favor while they can. There aren't a lot of draw engines left within the deck of the Druid, so it's only a matter of time before that's a completely dead card in the hand of Selesnyan.
I don't know. With the amount of swing that we've been seeing, ooh, actually, Fandral Staghelm. This is actually one of my favorite cards that Druid actually has. My favorite legendary, I think, just because it looks so cool. Also, the effect when it comes out, whenever he says it's so sick. Fandral, of course, says, "Why choose when I can really just have both? I want my cake. I want to eat it too." And now he has a little bit of leeway to play with. So maybe we hit Fandral to hit the field, and then you have another body to help contest the board. I don't think you would have enough mana left over, though, to make use of Feral Rage.
And that's totally fine. I think in this particular position, Fandral acts as a pseudo-taunt. They recognize this as something that they may have to dedicate resources in order to take care of. If they don't address it and they go straight face, they're going to be getting value out of Feral Rage. If they do address it, that's a lot of damage that could be hitting face that instead is soaked up by the Fandral.
I also kind of want to point out that with all these spells that we've been seeing coming out from Noblord, that's really feeding into Yogg's fire and potentially his fire power. You could see anything happen, so there's always that wild X factor in case there was some chance that UT San Antonio fills up the board, overwhelms Rutgers, and then they could drop Yogg and maybe find some AoEs as well. But let's talk about Selesnyan. He's struggling to find some sort of a way to make a comeback onto the board. Is there any way that you see Finja being used here that could potentially help you out?
Honestly, it's tough because to proc Finja, you're going to need to actually get an actual minion kill. So what's probably going to happen, he's going to be using the Rockpool Hunter, buffing up the Finja, and then having it trade into the 3/3 Golem here.
He needs to move quickly. And let's see what comes out of it.
Ooh.
Let's see.
Murloc War Leader, okay, and now this is actually looking like a pretty significant board. The Primal Fin Lookout comes out on top of that. They have a Bluegill Warrior. Will they have time to actually play it and send it to face?
No, and also the board is too full. But now, Auctioneer shows up. So what do you think, Justin? Is there a particular line of play that you like here? I think there's some trades that might happen, and try to see if you can reduce the board guaranteed. But do you see Yogg happening here? Do you see them trying to see if they can count on the power of luck to help clear the board, or are you just going to keep it consistent?
I like this play instead. I think it's with the role of Yogg on this deck, it's more like a in case of emergency, break open Yogg. And they haven't actually been feeling that pressure. The scariest thing was that Murloc War Leader, and with that actually knocked out, now this is a very manageable board. You see the Feral Rage getting a lot of value with both the attack as well as the armor buff, and that's going to, again, just clean up another additional piece that Selesny is trying to assemble onto this board. Cold Light Oracle comes out. They're digging so hard for this War Leader at this point.
This definitely feels... Is it... Ooh, swipe. Is that actually going to be able to help? You could take out 2 of them. But anyway, that would also feed into the fuel of Gadgets and Auctioneer. Same thing with Jade Blossom as well. Murloc War Leader, though, actually coming out, hitting the field, buffing everything up, as well as having a Bluegill Warrior. Could this be enough to shift the tides of battle?
It can, but of course there is, like you mentioned, the X factor. In case it's a board state that Noblord can't really contend with, that Rutgers just doesn't have an answer for, we're going to be seeing that Yogg slam down, and we've seen quite a few spells thus far, Nibs. It's going to be a fun one.
Whenever Yogg hits the field, I feel like it's this potential massive party. Because it feels like fireworks are really going off, and sometimes you really just have to just take in the sights. So are we doing it? Are we busting him out? No. Instead, we're going to look for Blood Mage Thalnos, going for the swipe, potentially to in addition to Wrath, potentially to try to get rid of the War Leader and then set up an efficient board wipe.
Yeah, this is going to clear up actually everything if he just points that swipe to face. There's not going to be something with more than 2 health on the side of Selesny, and the fact that that Wrath is buffed up means that 1 amount of damage is just buffed up to 2 to wipe the entire board. And this is what we've been seeing from Rutgers. They're playing very conservative overall. They know when to dump out their hand in order to play around Divine Favor. And they still, at the end of the day, do have that Yogg on in case things really get out of control.
But also think about it. That's the second Murloc War Leader that we saw, right? Those are the real MVPs of this deck, so to speak, right? Because it buffs all the Murlocs that you would have on the field. This feels like it's been really a battle of attrition, but also more of a debate. Rutgers constantly, UT San Antonio looking for questions, trying to see if they could find something that really puts Noblord on his heels, but Noblord's found a bunch of different solutions.
And they just don't have any methods of refill left. I think that this game is all but wrapped up. They don't have the Firepower because they don't have the Murloc War Leaders. They don't have draws because they've used both of their Divine Favors. We saw that when they used the small-time recruits, it only was able to pick up 1 minion. I think that this is all but over. The Jade party is going to be beginning as well. And UTSA just might be tapping out momentarily.
Yeah, this really has now seemed like a battle where Noblord has done so many things right throughout this set. And it's also the fact that UT San Antonio had dropped upon a bunch of these minions. Now they have to contest with this massive board. It feels like really Selesny has been disarmed. He's going to try to see if he can draw through. No, there's nothing left, and that's going to be it.
Like we said, and that was indicated by that last small-time recruit. He was only able to get one mana minion. And so no draws, like we said. Developing an eye for an eye, it's not going to really do much. And Rutgers, they found a way. They've gone the distance, and they're going to be squaring off against Poly Montreal in grand finals. What a set so far. Complete dominance. And it's clear to the folks at home why now this is one of the heavy favorites to take this entire tournament.
Rutgers takes it. And Noblord, of course, it seals suitable that he's the one to draw the finishing blow to his opponents of UT San Antonio. Noblord has had fantastic performances in the past, but with the team behind him, with the support network, with these homies that he has, they really are going to go to the finish line as family, but with Noblord, of course, being at the helm.
It would be so wonderful. Like we said, he's been somebody who's very respected and regarded by his peers in the Hearthstone community, by his peers that have journeyed with him for these past couple of months, and yet he's always fell a bit short of achieving glory. Yeah. And finally, in grand finals, we get to see just how sharp this man's mind is. Let's see if he can put it to work against a very, very formidable team.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. He's gotten so close. He's had that top 8, but there's nothing really quite as sweet as victory. And now with his teammates, he has a chance for that. He's sitting in grand finals. I can imagine he's like the happiest guy right now because he gets that shot, Justin. It's so important.
I'd be pretty happy right now. Let's go ahead and take a quick look, actually, at what just transpired. We saw one win from Awful on the side of UT San Antonio, but man, if you're playing bingo, any sort of lottery right now, you're betting on Rutgers. They were able to etch out so many different wins throughout the sets. We saw sets 1 and 2 being in complete dominance without a single game being won on the side of UT San Antonio.
I mean, it's something that we're used to seeing from Rutgers. All up until this point, their tournament record has been near spotless. A couple of exceptions here and there, but honestly, Rutgers, Noblord, these guys, they're pros. They're delivering.
Yeah, to think that they had the most struggles during the qualifying rounds is something to think about. I think in the qualifiers they had lost 2 rounds in a row, and if they had lost one more, they might not even be here. But they're here today, and they're ready to get to grand finals. Let's throw it over to Frodan for a quick interview.
Thank you very much, guys. I'm joined by Rutgers. Are you ready for the finals?
Yeah, we're definitely ready.
Absolutely. That's a great performance. You guys came out firing like 4-0, I think, started off the series. Did you guys feel like it all fell to plan, or were you just getting lucky there?
Well, we did a little research on how our opponents were going to queue up, and so we made predictions, and the predictions were accurate. So it was happy that our research paid off.
Yeah, I looked in the morning, and Noblord has a tendency to do a lot of preparation before any events. I remember last call, he was preparing this big spreadsheet. Before other events, he does predictions how other players will do. And so I was seeing the spreadsheet this morning, and it was really intense. And I saw the other team, they were just kind of taking it easy. So I feel like, in this case, preparation really paid off.
Yeah, it's because they had a tendency to do something, and so we'll probably bring it up to them later, and we'll let them know what they were doing.
That's great. Now, you mentioned that the communications, though, has always been very lighthearted, and you guys have been having fun. And I saw you guys were getting a little intense during the semifinals at all. Was that just more jokes, or were you guys actually just ramping up the intensity?
I think we were talking to the admins a bunch, just having fun. And Mike's headset didn't work for a little bit, so that was a little. But then it started working again, so we're all good.
Yeah, I remember I heard Orpheus like, I can't hear you, blah, blah, blah. And just kind of yelling back and forth. But it seems like you guys are good spirits, and you guys get a well-deserved break, I believe 20 minutes before the grand final. So there you have it. The second finalist will be Rutgers University representing the East Coast.
Wow, Rutgers. What a performance in that last series. I mean, that match was literally, if you look at the scorecards, domination top to bottom.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. These guys have definitely come together as a great unit, and they've found what works for them, what meshes. It's dope to see that all these guys have come together around that same love, that same passion for esports, for Hearthstone, but also around this common goal of really getting Noblord up to the top. And they learned probably a lot along the way.
They really are a nice, cohesive unit. And even speaking with the other members of the team, you look at Noblord, and people always kind of look at him as the star player, and his supporting players also say that as well. But Noblord couldn't do this alone. There have been so many times that his teammates have come to his aid, that folks like Orpheus and Ludicolo have come to his aid and pointed out, hey, maybe this isn't necessarily the right line of play that we need to go by. And that's that sort of team synergy, that understanding, that dynamic that they've developed since January is what has allowed them to get to grand finals. So let's go ahead and take a look at the bracket, see the entirety of this journey. We started out with 8 teams yesterday, and now we're down to the final 2. Poly Montreal taking it over Shawnee State earlier this morning, and now they're rearing up, getting ready to face Rutgers after a smackdown of UT San Antonio.
Yeah, as a Texan, my heart hurts a little bit, but at the same time, Rutgers put on quite the show. It was a lot of fun to watch, and clearly they really enjoyed the ride themselves. So I'm excited to see this. Who do you think? There's definitely a lot of favorites between this, but I think a lot of people are voting for Rutgers to come out on top.
Very much so. But I got to give a shout out to Poly Montreal. They're the lone team from Canada that's here, and they're doing amazingly well. It started off with 800 teams. We whittled it down to 8 for this live event. This morning we had 4, and now we're down to just 2 teams left to compete for the largest slice of that $160,000 scholarship prize pool. It's anybody's game at this point.
Man, this is going to be really exciting. I know that we're going to be watching out in the audience and seeing every single play and studying every move. I'm excited to see what these collegiate warriors are bringing to the table.
And I'm excited to see what else is happening around the tavern. Let's toss it over to Frodan to see what's brewing downstairs.
Thank you very much, guys. I'm joined by Admirable, who's been chilling here in the fireside. This place is actually packed, and the atmosphere is great. And I actually haven't been part of a fireside this large. Have you?
No, I haven't. I've been down to the Folsom Street Foundry when they were running some events in 2015 and 2016 a bit, but this has just been a great turnout so far. A lot of new faces here.
Yeah, that's right. And, I've been hearing you talk a little bit about the fireside specifically. What are the parts you've been enjoying the most?
I just like meeting new people and getting to talk about all the decks that they've been building. Everyone seems to come up with their own kooky ideas of how to play stuff, and I played against a couple people with like 4 crabs in my Quest Rogue deck, and then they're always playing Taunt Warrior and Priest. So you can never quite guess what anyone's going to be playing, and sometimes they have some interesting tech choices that really make a big impact.
So you've been playing here in the Fireside, and you've been losing.
Yeah, I've actually lost every single game against people that I've played so far.
Come on, Nathan, you gotta have one for the casters. But you know, at least you're mingling with the people and having fun. It seems like you're having a lot of good time there. Now that you've been watching the games, and you know some players have been putting on some pretty dominant performances, do you have any predictions for the finals here?
I think it's going to be pretty close, but I have to go with Rutgers in the finals. They've just been looking absolutely stellar in all their situations. In times where they have cards that are flexible, I feel like they've been using them in a bit more of an aggressive way, and I think that approach is giving them more control than we've seen some of the other teams so far. So I got to go with Rutgers in this one.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do got to say that Montreal has been surprising people, and I think Canada has also proven themselves to be a very strong region in general, and specifically from Eastern Canada and Montreal, we've been seeing a lot of great players come out of them in recent times, even dating back to last year where Sidonia had a breakout performance, and Doc Pone this year being able to do it. So I feel like Canada definitely has a shot, don't you?
Something must be in the water in that area because it just continues to produce a lot of good players. We had all 3 players at the Montreal location for winter playoffs. They all had championship appearances after that event, and it's just this team continues to perform, and I think they've looked very strong as well. It's tough for me to give it that call, but again, I think it's going to be very close. They definitely have a good chance.
All right, well, I think Admiral's slightly biased because, of course, he's a USA citizen, so he's got to go with the hometown crowd here. It's become a Canada versus America finals coming up here. But we do want to give the teams, at least for Rutgers, a little bit of an opportunity to break because they do have to draft for the grand finals a new lineup. And so we will be doing a new segment that we're going to call the Hearthstone Trivia. Now, the way you guys can participate online at home, or if you are here in the Fireside, the way you go is to go to kahoot.it and log onto your device and type in the pin for the game. We have up to 4,000 spots, so make sure you're good and fast. And we're going to do 20 questions of Hearthstone trivia, and we're going to have a top 5 leaderboard. So make sure you guys get an opportunity to participate in this upcoming break. I believe about 10 to 12 minutes. And when we come back, the grand finals of the 2017 Hearthstone Collegiate Championships.